I had always been the kind of person who wondered about boundaries, about how far I could really go if I ever stepped outside my comfort zone. For years, I kept myself in a neat little bubble: responsible job, steady friendships, a quiet apartment in Chicago, and a routine that barely wavered. My name is Jessica, and at 34, I realized that while I had accomplished many of the things I thought I wanted, there was still something unsettled inside me. It wasn't that I was unhappy, but I often asked myself, what if I tried something completely different? What if I tested myself to see how much I could handle? The idea first crept into my mind after a long conversation with my best friend, Amanda. She had always been more daring than me, the type who would backpack alone in Europe or try activities that made my stomach turn at the very thought. One night, over a glass of wine in my living room, she said, "Jess, you've built this safe little world around yourself. Don't you ever want to break out of it?" At first, I laughed it off, but her words stayed with me for days. I started reflecting on how predictable my life had become, how every weekend looked exactly like the one before. It wasn't bad, but it wasn't thrilling either. That's when the idea of pushing my limits began to take root. Testing my limits wasn't about danger. It wasn't about doing something reckless for the sake of it. Instead, it was about challenging myself emotionally, mentally, and socially. I wanted to open myself up to experiences that would stretch me, maybe even scare me a little, but ultimately help me grow. And so, I decided to organize an evening that would be completely outside of my usual pattern. I invited a few people over, friends, acquaintances, and even colleagues who I normally only chatted with briefly in the break room. It was a mixed group, intentionally so, because I wanted to see what would happen when I brought different personalities into one space. The night of the gathering, my apartment felt transformed. I had rearranged the furniture to create a more open and inviting atmosphere. Soft lights glowed from lamps I rarely turned on, music played gently in the background, and the smell of food I had prepared filled the air. I remember standing in the center of the room just before everyone arrived, taking a deep breath and telling myself, "This is it. Tonight, you're going to find out what you're really made of." The first to arrive was Ryan, a colleague from work. He was usually quiet in the office, the type who kept his head down and focused on his projects, but he had a kind smile. Then came Amanda, of course, who gave me an approving look as if she already knew I was about to step into uncharted territory. After her, Michael and Sarah, my neighbors from 2 floors below, knocked on the door. They were easygoing and had the kind of energy that instantly brightened any room. Soon after, Emma, an old college friend, arrived with her boyfriend Daniel. By the time everyone was there, the room was filled with laughter, clinking glasses, and the kind of chatter that only comes when strangers are discovering common ground. At first, I felt nervous, almost like I had staged something I wasn't prepared to handle. But as the evening unfolded, I found myself leaning into conversations in a way I never had before. Normally, I was the listener, the one who asked questions but rarely revealed much about myself. That night, though, I decided to be open. I told stories I had kept to myself for years, embarrassing mistakes, fears, and even small dreams I had been too shy to admit. To my surprise, the more I shared, the more others opened up too. Ryan revealed that he had always wanted to quit his job and pursue photography full-time, but was too afraid of financial instability. Sarah talked about her struggles with confidence and how she sometimes pretended to be more outgoing than she really felt. Emma admitted that her relationship with Daniel wasn't as perfect as it seemed on social media. Suddenly, we weren't just a group of acquaintances anymore. We were people sharing pieces of our lives that usually stayed hidden. At one point, Amanda leaned over to me and whispered, "See? This is what I meant. Look at you, creating a space where people feel safe to be real. That's a gift, Jess." Her words made me realize that testing my limits didn't have to mean climbing a mountain or jumping out of a plane. Sometimes it was as simple as allowing vulnerability, as daring as inviting people into the parts of yourself you usually keep locked away. As the night continued, the conversations deepened. Michael suggested a game where each person would write down something they had always wanted to try but hadn't yet, then fold the paper and place it in a bowl. We would pull them out one by one and discuss them. It sounded simple, but what unfolded was extraordinary. One slip of paper read, "Travel alone to a country where I don't speak the language." Another said, "Tell my parents the truth about who I really am." Mine, written in shaky handwriting, said, "Stop living safely and start living fully." When Amanda read it aloud, the room grew quiet for a moment before she smiled knowingly at me. Looks like someone is already on their way. What struck me was how much we all longed for something bigger, braver, and more honest in our lives. The room became a space of encouragement, where no dream was dismissed and no fear was mocked. Each of us, in our own way, was admitting that we wanted to push past the walls we had built around ourselves. By the end of the night, I felt lighter, freer, and strangely exhilarated. I had set out to test my limits, and what I discovered was that my real limit had always been my own fear of connection. I thought testing myself would be about doing something extreme, but it turned out that the bravest thing I could do was to let people in, to admit my fears, and to encourage others to do the same. In the weeks that followed, the effects of that night lingered. Ryan signed up for a photography course and started sharing his work online. Sarah joined a public speaking group to build her confidence. Emma and Daniel had difficult but honest conversations that brought them closer together. And me? I started saying yes more often, yes to new friendships, yes to trying activities I normally would have avoided, yes to being more vulnerable at work and in my personal life. I even took a solo trip to the mountains, something I never thought I'd have the courage to do. Testing my limits taught me that boundaries are often self-imposed. The fears that hold us back are usually louder in our minds than they are in reality. That night I invited everyone wasn't just a gathering, it was the beginning of a new chapter. One where I allowed myself to step outside the safety of routine and embrace the unpredictable, the raw and the real. And perhaps the most powerful lesson was this: testing your limits isn't about reckless adventure. It's about courage, the courage to try, to fail, to connect, and to grow. When I look back now, I realize that the night I invited them over wasn't the end of a story. It was the beginning of one that is still unfolding every day, with every choice I make to live fully instead of safely.